Cole Harlan dropped his fence post the second he heard her scream. She burst through the mesquite like something the desert had tried to swallow, whole barefoot, bleeding from both knees, her dark hair wild and broken loose, her eyes wide with a terror that no animal ever wore. She ran like someone who already knew what happened to people who stopped running. Then Cole looked past her. 6 riders, cresting the ridge in a slow, patient line, not lawmen, not bounty hunters. Men in dark dusters who moved like people who'd already decided how this ended. Men who believed the hunt was over. If this story moves you, please subscribe to our channel and follow along until the very end and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. Now let's begin. Cole Harlan had not spoken to another living soul in 11 days. That was not unusual. His nearest neighbor sat 4 miles east, and the town of Red Rock spread 8 miles beyond that, a loose scatter of warped storefronts and broken men that Cole visited only when he needed flour coffee or horseshoe nails. He preferred the silence of the land. The desert didn't pretend. It didn't promise things it couldn't keep. It just sat there under the vast Arizona sky, honest and brutal, and Cole respected that more than he'd ever respected most people. He was driving rotted fence posts along his eastern boundary when the movement caught him a flicker near the dry wash, too upright for a coyote, too desperate for anything wild. He straightened slowly and put his hand above his eyes against the hammering afternoon glare. She came through the mesquite at a dead sprint, stumbling, catching herself on both hands, lunging back up and running again. Barefoot, both knees dark with blood and dust. Her dress was Apache hand-sewn deep red with faded geometric borders along the hem, and it had been torn somewhere along the run. She was young, 16, maybe 17, and she ran with everything she had, which clearly wasn't much left. Cole stepped forward. She saw him and flinched so hard, she nearly pitched face first into the hardpan. "Easy," he said. "I ain't gonna hurt you." She didn't stop. She ran straight at him because he was the only solid thing standing between her and whatever was coming behind her, and she slammed into him with both arms out and grabbed hold of his shirt with both fists. "Please," she gasped. The word came out ragged and torn. "Please don't let them take me." Cole looked past her. 6 riders coming over the ridge at a measured walk, spread wide in a practiced line. Dark dusters. No badges catching the light. They moved with the unhurried calm of men who had already decided how a thing was going to end and were simply waiting for the moment to arrive. Cole had fought in the war. He'd ridden with the Texas Rangers for 3 hard years afterward. He knew exactly how dangerous men moved when they weren't worried about witnesses. These were those kinds of men. He looked at the girl. He looked at the terror in her eyes, not performance, not exaggeration, the real kind. The kind that only lives in a person who has already watched something terrible happen and knows with absolute certainty they are next. He made his decision in 3 seconds flat. "My barn," he said. "Go around the back. Last stall on the right opens into a grain room. Bolt the door from inside and don't make a sound. Don't open it for anyone but me." She stared at him for one raw, searching moment, like she was measuring whether to believe him. "Go," he said. "Right now." She went. Cole picked up his fence post, turned around, and waited. The lead rider pulled up about 20 feet away. He was maybe 40, clean-shaven, with good clothes and a quality Cole recognized from men who spent their lives working for powerful people. A particular ease, a practiced patience. The look of someone who had never once in his life expected to face a real consequence. He had light, flat eyes and a smile that didn't come from anything warm. "Afternoon," the man said pleasantly. "Afternoon," Cole said. "Name's Holloway. We're looking for an Apache girl. Young. Came through this area in the last quarter hour." Cole looked at the horizon like he was genuinely thinking it over. "Saw a deer," he said. "Spooked my horse something considerable." "You sure about that?" "I'm generally sure about what I see on my own land." Holloway's smile held without changing. "She's a runaway, ward of the territorial court. If you've seen her, you're legally obligated to report it." Report it to who? To us. Cole set the fence post in the hole he'd dug and kept his eyes on Holloway. What court appointed you? A pause. One of the riders to the left shifted his weight. Another rested his hand on his holster in a casual, deliberate way, not drawing, just reminding Cole the option existed. Cole didn't look at the gun. He looked at Holloway. Mr. Holloway began. Harlan? Mr. Harlan, this is a legal matter. If you're obstructing a lawful retrieval— I ain't obstructed anyone, Cole said evenly. You rode onto my land without invitation. I answered your question. I haven't seen any Apache girl. He looked at Holloway steadily. Now you want to tell me what she actually did, or are you planning to sit on that horse on my property until sundown? The smile flickered for just a moment. Something moved behind Holloway's pale eyes, a small recalculation. We'll be watching the roads, Holloway said. That you're right, Cole said. If we find she was here, then you'll have found something that ain't here, Cole said. Good day, Mr. Holloway. Holloway looked at him for a long, measuring moment. Then he pulled his horse around. The 6 riders walked away south along the ridgeline, slow and unhurried, and Cole watched them until the last horse disappeared beyond the mesa without once letting his hand move toward his revolver. Then he walked back to the barn. He knocked twice on the grain room door, then once. They're gone, he said. For now. He heard the bolt slide. The door opened 2 inches. One dark eye appeared in the gap, sweeping the barn behind him before settling on his face. They'll come back, the girl said. Probably. More of them next time. Also probable. Cole kept his voice level. You want to come out and tell me exactly what I just put myself in the middle of? The door swung open. She came out carefully, favoring her left foot, arms wrapped around herself, despite the late summer heat that sat heavy even inside the barn. Up close, she looked younger and older, at the same time younger in her face, which was still soft and unguarded in the way of youth, and older in her eyes, which had already seen too much of what the world was capable of before most people even learned to ask the right questions. She looked around the barn once, taking in every exit, and Cole noted that without comment. I'm Cole Harlan, he said. This is my ranch. I know whose ranch this is, she said quietly. My grandmother used to gather juniper berries along your eastern fence line. That surprised him enough that he showed it. Your grandmother. Her name was Spotted Deer. She passed 2 winters ago. She lifted her chin slightly, the small, precise gesture of someone refusing to come apart in front of a stranger. My name is Ayanna. My father was Thomas Runningwater. He was an elder of our band and a spokesman in the land negotiations with the territorial government. Cole caught the past tense. Didn't let on. She caught him catching it. They killed him this morning, she said plainly. The words dropped between them like stones. Cole pulled over his wooden stool and sat down. He gestured at the hay bales across from him. After a moment, Ayanna sat still, keeping her arms wrapped around herself, still watching the barn door. Tell me, Cole said. So she did. Her father had spent 3 years fighting to protect Apache Canyon land west of Red Rock Land, recognized in a treaty signed 17 years ago by the federal government land that Apache families had lived on since before anyone writing the treaty was born. Then Pacific Southern Railroad decided that land sat between 2 points. They wanted to connect with iron rails, and suddenly the treaty had developed remarkable flexibility. He found out they were forging documents, Ayanna said. Her voice stayed steady. Her hands did not. Bills of sale. Land grants with Apache signatures on them. My father went band to band. He found not one person who had signed anything, not one elder who had agreed to sell or transfer a single acre. Every signature on those papers was invented. He took it to court, Cole said. He tried. Something moved in her face, not anger, not sadness, but something harder and quieter than either. The territorial judge looked at the documents and said they appeared legitimate. My father called them forgeries. The judge said— She stopped. What did he say? He said, Mr. Runningwater, who are 12 men in that jury box going to believe Apache testimony or signed federal documents? She said it with the flat precision of someone who had memorized those words because they had landed like a blow and she needed to hold them where she could look at them. My father walked out of that courthouse and kept digging. Cole was quiet. He had lived long enough to know that Judge's question wasn't unusual. He hated that he knew that. He found the original treaty, Ayanna continued. A copy sent to the Land Records office in Santa Fe. He found correspondence letters between the railroad's lawyers and the judge discussing payments, discussing making the Apache claim disappear before it complicated the route survey. She reached into the front of her dress and pulled out a small oilskin bundle wrapped tight and tied with a thin leather cord. He kept it all in here. He told me months ago that if anything ever happened to him, I needed to run. Cole looked at the bundle without reaching for it. And something happened to him, he said. 4 men came before sunrise. They said they had documents for my father to review papers requiring his signature. She looked at the oilskin bundle in her hands. He went outside to speak with them. He didn't want to wake me. A pause that lasted exactly as long as she could control it. I heard the shot. She said it without decoration. Just the clean, brutal fact of it. Cole sat with that for a moment. He thought about Holloway's flat eyes and his careful, patient smile. He thought about 6 riders on a ridge moving slow because they weren't afraid of being seen, only of leaving evidence. Holloway, Cole said. Who does he work for? A man named Gerald Crane. He runs land acquisition for Pacific Southern out of Tucson. He's the one who commissioned the forged documents. My father tracked every payment, every letter, every intermediary back to him. Ayanna's jaw set. Crane is the one who decided my father was a problem that needed solving. The sheriff, Cole said. Briggs. Ayanna looked at him and said nothing, and her silence was its own complete answer. Cole stood up and walked to the barn door and looked out at the ridgeline. The sun was sliding down toward the mesa tops. In an hour, the light would fail. He stood there thinking because a man in his situation needed to think clearly, and he had learned to take whatever time that required. Tucson's 4 days by road, he said. I know how far Tucson is. There's an attorney there, David Morales. He's been working with my father for 2 years, trying to build a federal case, not territorial federal. A judge who doesn't owe Crane anything. Ayanna stood. If I can get those documents to Morales, he can file an emergency motion. He has contacts at the federal land office at 2 newspapers. Crane can make things disappear in Arizona territory. He can't make them disappear in Washington. Cole turned from the door. You know how to ride. I know how to ride better than you do, she said without hesitation. He looked at her. Something shifted in his chest, not quite amusement, but close to it, and closer to respect. There's a back trail through the canyon country, he said. Cuts well clear of the main road until past the county line. Adds half a day, but Holloway won't have men on it. When? Not tonight. You're running on empty, and my horses need rest. We leave before 4 in the morning. She studied him the way people study something they're not certain they can trust, measuring it from every angle. You're going to help me, she said. Yes. Why? Cole was quiet for a moment. He walked to the stall rail and rested his forearms on it and looked at his horses without answering right away, because the honest answer deserved more than a quick word. Because your father did everything right, he said finally. He went to court. He gathered evidence. He tried to work through the system the way the system is supposed to work. And 4 men came before sunrise and shot him for it. He didn't look at her. That ain't something a man can just watch happen and go back to fixing fence posts. Ayanna said nothing. He brought her water-dried beef cornbread left from 3 days ago. He gave her the grain room with the bolt on the inside and went back to the house and loaded his rifle. Both revolvers, and sat down in the chair by the front window where he could see the road and the ridge and the long dark sweep of the desert between them. He did not sleep. Around midnight he heard footsteps cross the barn floor, careful and quiet, and then a soft knock at the house door. He had the rifle in his hand before the second knock landed. It's Ayanna. He opened the door. She stood in the doorway with the blanket pulled around her shoulders, her face composed, but her eyes sharp and awake. "Someone's on the ridge," she said quietly. "I saw firelight. They covered it fast, but it was there." Cole felt that old cold settling in his chest, the adjustment a soldier makes when he accepts that the situation has become what it has become. "How many?" "At least 3, maybe 4. He stepped back from the door. "Sleep in the house. Back room. There's a window on the south wall if something comes through that front door, and it isn't me. You go out that window and run due south into the canyon break. Don't wait. Don't look back." She stepped inside. She looked at the spare quiet house, the single chair by the window, the rifle rack with its 3 long guns, the tin coffee cup still sitting on the table from that morning, as if the ordinary day that had held it was still real somewhere. "You live alone a long time," she said. "Long enough," he said. She looked at him in that careful, measuring way again. "My father used to say that a man who lives alone has either made his peace with the world or he's still fighting something he can't name." "Your father sounds like he thought about things." "He thought about everything." She held the oilskin bundle against her chest. "He believed that truth had weight, that you couldn't bury it permanently, that it always found its way to the surface eventually, like water through rock." "He may have been right," Cole said. "He's dead," she said, not bitterly, just honestly, the way you say a thing when you are too tired for anything but the truth. Cole had no answer for that. She went down the hall. He sat back down in his chair, rifle across his knees, and watched the darkness beyond the window where 3 or 4 men sat around a covered fire on a ridge waiting for morning, waiting for the moment when a rancher and a dead man's daughter would have to step out into the open. He thought about Thomas Runningwater stepping out his door before sunrise to meet men with papers. He thought about a girl hearing a shot and running. He thought about Holloway's smile and Gerald Crane sitting comfortable in his Tucson office, certain the problem had been handled. Cole Harlan had spent years building a quiet life. He had earned every square foot of the silence around him. He had bled for it in the war and sweated for it on this land, and defended it in his own way by simply staying. But silence had a cost he hadn't always accounted for. He watched the ridge. He watched the road. He watched the long, dark nothing between him and whatever was coming. He'd been in worse positions. He just couldn't at that exact moment remember precisely when. Cole heard them at 2:30 in the morning. Not horses. Boots. The soft, careful drag of boot leather on dry ground that a man only makes when he is trying very hard not to be heard, which meant he understood he was doing something that required silence. Cole was on his feet before the sound registered as a conscious thought. He crossed to the hallway in 3 steps and knocked twice on the back room door. "Ayanna." Low, controlled. The door opened immediately. She hadn't been sleeping either. "How many?" she whispered. "Don't know yet. Stay back from the windows." He pressed his rifle into her hands. "You know how to use this?" She looked at him like that was a deeply unnecessary question. "Don't shoot unless something comes through that door," he said, "and not until you're certain." She nodded once and melted back into the shadows of the room. Cole went back to the front window. He watched. 2 minutes passed. Then a shape moved near the fence line, a man crouching low, moving toward the barn. Another shape appeared on the opposite side of the yard, working toward the house from the east. They were flanking, splitting the approach. 2 men at least, probably more, staying back with the horses. Then the knock came at the front door. 3 solid, unhurried raps. "Mr. Harlan." Holloway's voice, calm as church. "I know you're awake. I'd appreciate a conversation." Cole stood to the side of the door. "It's 2 in the morning, Holloway." "Yes, it is. Which tells you something about how serious this has become." "Tells me something about how serious you think it is," Cole said. "Those are different things." A pause. "I have a deputy with me," Holloway said. "Official territorial authority. I'd like to speak with you lawfully rather than otherwise. Open the door, Mr. Harlan. Please." Cole looked at the door for a moment. He thought about the man near the barn, the man near the east side. the word otherwise hanging in Holloway's sentence like a loaded gun. He opened the door. Holloway stood on the porch with a younger man beside him, wearing a deputy's badge that caught the moonlight. The deputy had a wide, blank face and eyes that moved constantly, cataloging the room behind Cole, with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd done this kind of work before. "Thank you," Holloway said pleasantly. "You said official," Cole said. "That badge belonged to the county?" "It does," said the deputy. "Which county?" The deputy's eyes stopped moving. "Maricopa. We're in Pinal County," Cole said. A brief, tight silence. "There's been a development," Holloway said smoothly, redirecting. "The girl we're looking for, Ayanna Running Water there, was an incident at her father's camp this morning. A man was killed." "I heard something about a killing," Cole said. "Yes, the girl killed him. We have a witness." Cole kept his face entirely still. "You're telling me a 16-year-old Apache girl killed a man?" "17, Holloway said. "And yes, the witness is prepared to testify. We're not looking for a runaway anymore, Mr. Harlan. We're looking for a murderer." He said the word gently, reasonably, like a man who was sincerely sorry about an unfortunate truth. "If you've been harboring her under the impression that she was simply frightened, well, now you know the full picture." Cole leaned against the doorframe. "Who'd she kill?" "A territorial land agent named—" "Name," Cole said. Holloway paused for one fraction of a second. "Patterson. James Patterson." "And your witness?" "That's not information I'm required to—" "No," Cole agreed. "You're not required to tell me anything. Just like I'm not required to let you search my property without a proper warrant from a judge in this county." He looked at the badge on the deputy's chest. "Maricopa." Holloway's careful smile had thinned to something that barely deserved the name. "Mr. Harlan," he said, and the pleasantness had cooled considerably. "Pacific Southern Railroad has significant relationships with territorial officials at every level. That includes judges. If this becomes an adversarial situation, you will find yourself on the wrong side of a very large organization with a very long memory." "I've been on the wrong side of large organizations before," Cole said. "Survived it. Not organizations like this one." "We done," Cole said. Holloway looked at him for a long moment. Something moved in those pale eyes, not anger exactly, more like a man updating a calculation. "For tonight," Holloway said. Cole closed the door. He stood with his back against it and listened. Boots on the porch, voices too low to make out. Then the sound of men moving away back toward the ridge, and after a while the sound of horses. He went back down the hall. Ayanna was standing in the doorway of the back room with the rifle still in her hands and an expression on her face that Cole didn't have a name for, something between fury and something that looked like a terrible kind of recognition. "James Patterson," she said. "You heard. Patterson is the land agent who delivered the forged documents to the territorial court. He was there this morning. He was one of the 4 men who came for my father." She said it quietly, deliberately, like someone laying out facts in a courtroom. "He's not dead. He's their witness. They're going to say I killed him so that anything I say, any evidence I carry, is the word of a murderer." Cole was quiet. "They didn't just come for my father," Ayanna said. "They had this ready. The story was prepared. All they needed was for me to run." "Which you did," Cole said. "Because I heard a shot." "I know," he said. "I'm not questioning that. I'm saying they planned for every option. If you stayed, you were a witness they could silence. If you ran, you were a fugitive they could discredit." He looked at the oilskin bundle she still had pressed against her side. "They know about the documents. My father told no one else." "Holloway asked about a ward of the court this afternoon," Cole said. "Not a runaway girl, not a witness. A ward. That's legal language. Someone had already started building a file on you before your father was dead an hour." He walked to the table and sat down. "Someone talked. Someone who knew what your father had found." Ayanna set the rifle carefully on the table. She sat across from him. In the dim light coming through the window, she looked very young and very old in the same moment. "Open it," she said. She pushed the oilskin bundle toward him. "I want you to see what they killed him for." Cole untied the leather cord and unwrapped the oilskin. Inside was a folded paper packet, dry and carefully preserved. He opened it slowly. Letters. A dozen of them copied in a neat hand that Cole recognized as someone who'd spent time making sure the copies were exact. Survey documents. A land records transfer stamped with territorial seals. And at the bottom, a folded map. Cole spread the map on the table. It was a route survey. Pacific Southern Railroad's proposed line through the canyon country west of Red Rock. He followed the inked line with his finger through Apache land, through the canyon break, and then eastward, cutting across the mesa. He stopped. He looked at the map for a long moment without speaking. "Cole," Ayanna said quietly. He looked up. "You see it," she said. He did. The surveyed route ran directly across the southeastern corner of his land, across his well, the only reliable water source within 6 miles in any direction. He looked back at the map. There was a notation in the margin, small and neat, Harlan water rights acquisition pending. See correspondence file. See. "My father found that 2 weeks ago," Ayanna said. "He came to tell you. He rode out here twice. You weren't home." Cole thought about the 2 mornings he'd spent driving cattle to the upper pasture. "He was going to warn you," she said. "He thought you deserved to know that you were already on their list, that Crane's lawyers were already drawing up papers." She paused. "He believed in warning people. He believed in giving people the choice." Cole refolded the map with careful, deliberate hands. He looked at the correspondence file notation again. Then he placed everything back in the oilskin and rewrapped it. "So Holloway wasn't just watching this ranch because you might be here," he said. "No. He was watching it because it's already targeted." "Yes." Cole sat back. He thought about the careful, patient way Holloway had smiled on his porch. Not just the smile of a man hunting a girl. The smile of a man who already knew the final shape of something and was simply waiting for the pieces to arrive where he'd placed them. "They were going to come for this land regardless," Cole said. "Yes." "I was going to be a problem for them regardless." "Yes." He looked at her. "You could have told me this from the start." "I told you about my father," Ayanna said. "I told you about the documents and what was in them. I didn't know if you were the kind of man who would help a stranger more readily than he'd help himself." She met his eyes steadily. "Some men are like that. My father was like that." Cole was quiet for a moment. "That sounds like something your father should have been more careful about." "It does," she agreed. "And he's dead." She said it without self-pity, without accusation, just with the heavy, worn quality of a truth she'd been carrying all day and would carry much longer. "But the documents aren't, and Morales isn't, and the federal judge in Tucson who owes Crane nothing, he isn't either." A sound from outside. Not footsteps this time. Something harder. Metal maybe, or wood. Cole was at the window in 2 steps. One of Holloway's men was at the barn, not hiding anymore, moving openly with a lantern. "They're checking the horses," Cole said. He was through the back door of the house before Ayanna had crossed the room. He came around the south side of the barn fast and low, and when the man with the lantern turned and reached for his holster, Cole had his revolver pressed under the man's chin before the draw cleared leather. "Set it down," Cole said quietly. "Both hands where I can see them. Right now." The man froze. Slowly, with the exaggerated care of someone who understood how close the margin was, he let the half-drawn revolver drop to the ground. "You, Harlan," the man said. Who else would be standing in his own barn at 2 in the morning? Holloway said. "Holloway isn't here," Cole said. "Pick up that lantern with your left hand and walk ahead of me." He walked the man into the grain room and tied his wrist to the support post with saddle rope tight enough to hold loose enough not to cut off blood flow, because Cole Harlan was not that kind of man, even when the other side was. "You tell Holloway," Cole said, "that the next man who comes onto my property uninvited is going to have a significantly worse evening." He came back into the barn and found Ayanna standing at the entrance watching the ridge. "They moved 2 of your horses," she said. "Took them up the north trail while you were at the house." Cole went to the stalls. 2 horses gone. 2 remaining. His roan gelding, who was steady on rough ground, and a gray mare he'd been working for 3 months. Neither was going to carry double across the canyon trail without tiring before dawn. "We ride separate," he said. Agreed. "We leave now, not before 4 now, while they're regrouping." He saddled both horses in the dark, working by feel and memory. Ayanna tightened the gray mare's cinch strap without being asked correctly, without hesitating, and Cole didn't comment on it because she'd already told him she could ride, and he'd already believed her. He strapped his saddlebag behind the cantle, checked that both revolvers were loaded and seated, and slid his rifle into the saddle scabbard. "The canyon trail," he said. "You stay close. If we get separated, follow the dry wash south until you hit the old Mission Road. Don't stop until you're well past the county line." "And if you're the one who gets separated?" she asked. "Then you keep riding to Tucson without me." She looked at him. "That's not Ayanna." He looked at her directly. "Your father spent 3 years building what's in that bundle. Those documents get to Morales. That's what matters, not me." He took hold of the roan's reins. "You understand." She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "My father would have liked you." "Your father sounds like he had questionable judgment in people," Cole said. Something flickered across her face. Grief and almost laughter tangled together in the way they get when a person is very tired and the loss is very fresh. She mounted the gray mare in one clean motion. Cole swung up onto the roan. They went out the back of the barn, away from the ridge, away from the road, into the dark canyon country that Cole had ridden 1,000 times and could navigate in his sleep. The desert opened up around them wide and black and indifferent, full of the particular silence of a place where dangerous things moved without announcing themselves. Behind them, from somewhere up on the ridge, a lantern flickered. Then a shout. Then the sound of horses. Cole pressed his heels into the roan's sides and they ran. They rode hard for the first hour without speaking. The canyon trail was narrow and dark, and Cole knew every turn of it by instinct. Which rocks jutted into the path, which switchbacks tightened without warning, which sections of loose shale would swallow a horse's hoof if you pushed too fast. Behind them, the sound of pursuit lasted 30 minutes and then faded, replaced by silence. Either Holloway's men didn't know this trail, or they'd decided to go around and cut them off further south. Cole didn't trust the silence. Silence was the thing that killed men who'd survived everything else. "They stopped," Ayanna said. "They went around," Cole said. "There's a road through Mesquite Crossing that reaches the south end of this canyon before we do, if they push hard." "How far is Mesquite Crossing?" 4 miles east." "Can we avoid it?" "Not, and make the county line before daylight." He pulled the roan to a walk on a rough section. "There's a woman in Mesquite Crossing, Ruth Calloway. She runs the telegraph office. I've known her 8 years. She's straight, she's honest, and if anyone can get a wire to Tucson ahead of us, it's her." Ayanna was quiet for a moment. "A telegraph. If Morales knows we're coming, and why, he can have legal paperwork ready before we arrive. Federal injunction. Something that forces Crane to stop moving until a judge sees those documents. And if Holloway reaches Mesquite Crossing first, then Ruth will have seen him," Cole said, "and we'll know what we're riding into before we ride into it." They came out of the canyon as the first pale suggestion of morning touched the eastern sky, not light yet, just the absence of the deepest dark. Ayanna's gray mare had settled into a steady rhythm beside the roan, and Cole had stopped being surprised by how well she handled the horse. She rode the way people ride, when horses are not a skill, but a language, something learned before words. Mesquite Crossing was quiet when they came in from the west end of the main street. One lamp burning in the saloon window, another in the livery, the rest of the town still dark and closed. Cole pulled up at the side of the telegraph office and swung down. "Wait here," he said. "I don't wait well," Ayanna said, and swung down beside him. He almost argued. He didn't. He knocked at the side door twice, the way he always knocked for Ruth, and after a moment, a lamp moved behind the curtain, and the door opened. Ruth Calloway was 53 years old, with iron gray hair pinned back from a face that had been handsome once, and was now something better, strong and lived in and entirely honest. She took one look at Cole and then at Ayanna, and then at the dried blood on Ayanna's knees, and said nothing dramatic. She just said, "Come in," and held the door open. Inside, she set the lamp on the table and crossed her arms. "You look like a man who's made a significant decision recently." "More than one," Cole said. "We need a wire to Tucson. David Morales, Apache legal advocate. I need you to tell him Cole Harlan is coming with documentary evidence of land fraud and a federal treaty violation, and he needs to have injunctive paperwork ready." Ruth looked at him steadily. She looked at Ayanna. "This her father's case, Thomas Runningwater." Cole went still. "You know about it." "Cole." Ruth's voice was careful in a way that made his chest tighten. "I sent a wire to Tucson 4 hours ago." The words landed like a fist. "Who told you to send it?" Cole said. "Harold Fitch." She said the name like it tasted bad. "He came in around 10 o'clock last night. Said a dangerous Apache girl had killed a man and was likely heading toward Mesquite Crossing with a rancher who didn't understand what he'd gotten mixed up in. Said there was a reward. Said if I sent word to a man named Holloway in Red Rock." "Harold Fitch," Cole said. He knew that name. Harold Fitch owned the dry goods store 2 streets over. A careful man, a quiet man, always polite, always helpful, always knowing slightly more about other people's business than a man selling flour and nails had any right to know. "I sent it," Ruth said. "I'm not proud of it, but I sent it before I had reason not to." She looked at Ayanna directly. "Then I started thinking about Thomas Runningwater's name in that wire and what I knew about his case, which wasn't nothing because your father has been in this office twice sending his own wires to Santa Fe." She paused. "I sent a second wire an hour later, to Morales. Told him something was wrong and he needed to be ready." Ayanna let out a breath. "What exactly did you tell him?" "That Thomas Runningwater's case had become dangerous and that the documents might be coming to him under difficult circumstances." Ruth looked between them. "Did I help or hurt?" "Both," Cole said. "How long ago did Fitch send his wire?" 4 hours. "Holloway's had 4 hours to position men south of here." Cole turned to Ayanna. "They're going to be on the road between here and the county line before we are." "Then we don't use the road," Ayanna said. "The canyon route south is a full day's ride on foot if the horses give out." "Cole." Her voice stopped him. She had gone very still in the way that people go still when they have just heard something their mind is still catching up to. She was looking past him, at Ruth. "You said my father came here twice, to send wires." "That's right," Ruth said. "When was the last time?" Ruth thought. 10 days ago, maybe 11. He seemed like a man who believed something was about to break open. Urgent, very focused. Where was he staying? Ayanna's voice had changed. Something was underneath it, a fragile, frightened thing trying not to surface. "He mentioned a homestead," Ruth said slowly. "East of the canyon, an Apache family. He said if anything happened..." She stopped. "If anything happened..." Ayanna said quietly, urgently, "What?" Ruth looked at her with the careful eyes of a woman who understood she was about to say something that would break or save this girl, and took a breath. "He said if anything happened, there was a woman named Clara Swiftwind who would know where to find him." The silence that followed lasted exactly 3 seconds. Then Ayanna said, "He's alive." "I don't know that. He said find him. Not find his papers. Not tell someone. Find him." Her voice was shaking now for the first time since Cole had known her. "He's alive. He's hurt, but he's alive. He knew they were coming, and he told someone where he'd go." Cole looked at Ruth. "Clara Swiftwind. You know the homestead." "I know of it. 2 miles northeast. Small place, a family that keeps to themselves." 2 miles northeast. In the opposite direction from Tucson. Cole felt the weight of the decision before it fully formed as a thought. 2 miles northeast meant riding toward Holloway's likely position, not away from it. It meant losing time they didn't have. It meant risk on top of risk. He looked at Ayanna. Her face was entirely open in a way it hadn't been once in all the hours since she'd first grabbed his arm in the desert. The control she'd held together so precisely. The flat voice, the steady hands, the iron composure of a girl who had decided she could not afford to fall apart. All of it had cracked along a single line. She believed her father was alive. And Cole could not look at that and say, "We don't have time." "Ruth," he said, "is there a back way out of this building?" "Through the storeroom." "Get away from your windows for the next hour," Cole said. "Harold Fitch can't know we were here." "Harold Fitch," Ruth said crisply, "is going to find his credit at this office permanently discontinued." She was already moving to the back storeroom door. "Go." They went. They rode northeast in the growing gray light, fast enough to cover ground and quiet enough to listen. Cole kept his revolver loose in the holster and his eyes on the ridgelines. Ayanna rode slightly ahead of him, leaning forward over the mare's neck, like she could press the distance into shorter by wanting it hard enough. The Swiftwind homestead appeared a low structure, no lamp showing a single horse tied at the post. Before Cole could say anything, Ayanna was off the mare and at the door. An older Apache woman opened it before the knock fully landed, like she'd been watching the road. She looked at Ayanna, and her face broke open with relief. "He's here," she said. "He's been here since yesterday morning. I found him in the wash. I didn't know who else." Ayanna pushed past her. Cole stayed at the door. He kept his eyes on the road and listened to the sounds from inside, a man's voice, low and rough, and Ayanna's voice answering, and then silence, and then a sound that Cole turned away from because it was not his to witness. He gave them 2 minutes. That was all he could give them. He went inside. Thomas Runningwater lay on a low cot against the far wall. He was a lean man, maybe 55, with Ayanna's same dark eyes and the same quality of absolute stillness at the center of his expression. He'd been shot through the shoulder, a through and through that Clara Swiftwind had packed and bound, but which had bled enough to make him pale and slow. He was alive, but he was not going anywhere on horseback. Ayanna was crouched beside the cot, holding both his hands. She'd stopped crying already. She was back to herself, composed and sharp, listening while her father spoke. "Morales needs the survey map specifically," Thomas was saying. His voice was thin but precise. "The notation in the margin. File C. That's the key. That's where Crane's name appears directly, not through intermediaries. The letters are circumstantial. The map ties him personally." "I know," Ayanna said. "I know, Father. The water rights notation on the Harlan land. I know. We found it." She glanced up at Cole, and Thomas Runningwater's eyes followed. Cole crossed the room and stood at the foot of the cot. He looked at Thomas Runningwater, and Thomas Runningwater looked back at him. "You're Harlan," Thomas said. "Yes. I came to warn you." A pause. A careful breath around the pain. "Twice." "I know," Cole said. "I'm sorry I wasn't home." Thomas studied him for a moment. "You're here now." He reached beneath the edge of his blanket and produced a folded envelope, creased and slightly stained, sealed with plain wax. "This is a sworn affidavit. My account of every document I found, every meeting I attended, every payment I can verify. I wrote it 2 weeks ago, when I understood where this was going." He held it out. "Morales has been expecting it." Cole took it and tucked it inside his coat. "Can you ride?" Cole asked. Thomas shook his head. "Just once." "Not today." "Clara," Cole said to the woman standing behind him, "is there somewhere you can take him that isn't this house? Somewhere Holloway's men won't think to look?" Clara said, "My sister has a place in the canyon, 3 miles in, no road. Take him there. Today. Right now, as soon as we leave." He looked at Thomas. "You stay hidden until Morales files. Once those documents hit a federal judge's desk, you're a witness. Right now, you're a loose end." Thomas Runningwater looked at his daughter. "He's right," Ayanna said quietly. A moment between them, something passed in it that Cole couldn't read and didn't try to. Then Thomas squeezed Ayana's hands once and released them. "Go," he said. "Do what I couldn't finish." She stood. She bent and pressed her forehead briefly against his. Then she straightened, picked up the oilskin bundle from where she'd set it, and turned to the door. She stopped. Cole almost walked into her. Through the single window at the front of the homestead, 3 riders had appeared on the road, moving slow, looking at the horse tied at the post. At the homestead. At the road they'd come in on. Holloway's men. Not Holloway himself, but his men. Cole put his hand on Ayana's arm and moved her back from the window. He looked at Clara. "Back door." "No back door." Of course there wasn't. Cole looked around the room. He looked at Thomas on the cot. He looked at the single window and the 3 riders outside it, and he made the kind of calculation that he'd spent years making in bad situations. What could be sacrificed, what had to be protected, and which direction led forward. "Ayana," he said quietly. "That window on the south wall." She looked at it. Too small for a man. Not too small for her. "Go out. Take the mare. Head directly south. Don't take the road cut across the open ground toward the canyon break. They'll see you." He met her eyes. "That's the point. I'll come out the front and draw them east. You run south. They can't split 3 men 2 directions effectively." She stared at him. "You'll draw 3 armed men east, alone. It's a distraction, not a fight. Cole." "Ayana." He said her name the way her father had said go, not as a command, but as something more serious than a command. An appeal to the part of her that understood what mattered. "Those documents get to Morales. That's what your father built. That's what he got shot for." He put his hand out. "Give me something else to carry. Something they'll think is the bundle if they catch me." She looked at him for one long, raw moment. Then she reached into her saddlebag, pulled out a cloth-wrapped biscuit from Clara's provisions, and put it in his hand. He looked at it. "Close enough." The smallest, briefest thing crossed her face, grief and almost laughter again, that tangled combination he was beginning to recognize as the particular signature of her courage. She went to the south window. Cole went to the front door. He looked back once. Thomas Runningwater was watching him from the cot with dark, steady eyes. "Get that affidavit to my daughter," Thomas said. "Count on it," Cole said. He opened the front door and walked out into the early morning light, where 3 of Holloway's riders were 40 feet away and already turning to look at him. And Cole Harlan did the one thing that experienced men did when the numbers were wrong and the ground was not theirs. He walked straight toward them. "Morning," he said. The nearest rider's hand dropped to his holster. "Where's the girl?" "What girl?" Cole said, and kept walking, kept their eyes on him, kept every second of their attention pointed east, while behind him on the south side of a low homestead, a gray mare and a girl carrying everything her father had built broke free into open ground and ran. He heard the hoofbeats. The riders heard them too, and Cole threw the cloth-wrapped biscuit hard at the nearest horse's face, which startled the animal badly. Bought 3 seconds of chaos, and then a fist connected with the side of his head, and the ground came up hard, and the morning went briefly white. When his vision cleared, he was on his knees in the dust with a rifle barrel pressed against the back of his neck, and the 3 riders were split one on him, 2 already spurring south after the sound of hoofbeats. But the sound of hoofbeats was already fading. She was running. Cole spit blood and looked at the man holding the rifle on him. "You're going to want to take me to Holloway," Cole said calmly. "He's going to want to talk to me himself." The man stared at him. "I know where the documents are going," Cole said. "And Holloway is going to want that information very badly very soon." A pause. The rifle stayed where it was. "Get up," the man said finally. Cole got up. He kept his face neutral and his breathing steady and his mind on the sound of hoofbeats already too distant to hear. She was running. That was enough. They brought Cole to an abandoned assay office 3 miles east of Mesquite Crossing. a low building that Pacific Southern had bought and shuttered. When the ore ran thin, which meant it belonged to Crane, which meant no one who wasn't supposed to know about it did. They sat him in a chair and tied his wrists behind him and left him alone for 20 minutes, which Cole recognized as a technique. Make a man sit with his own fear long enough, and sometimes you don't need to do anything else. Cole sat with the pain in his jaw, where the rifle stock had connected, and listened to the two men outside the door talking about nothing in particular, and thought about Ayanna on the gray mare going south, and decided that 20 minutes of sitting wasn't going to change what mattered. Holloway came in without ceremony. He pulled a chair around and sat down facing Cole with his forearms resting on his knees, the posture of a man settling in for a real conversation, not a performance. "I want to understand you," Holloway said. "Most people don't," Cole said. "You're an intelligent man. You were a ranger. You've been around long enough to know how these situations resolve." He looked at Cole with something that might have been genuine curiosity. "That girl is carrying documents that a federal judge in Tucson is never going to see. Crane has relationships at every level of territorial law. The documents disappear, the case disappears, and 6 months from now nobody remembers Thomas Runningwater's name. That's not a threat, that's just the shape of the world you and I both live in." "Shape of the world changes," Cole said. "Not fast enough to help you today." Holloway leaned forward slightly. "Where is she going specifically?" "South," Cole said. "Cole, that's as specific as I can be." Holloway was quiet for a moment. "Gerald Crane is willing to be generous. Your land, the water rights, the acquisition filing gone. Permanently withdrawn. Your ranch stays exactly as it is. You walk out of here today with nothing owed and nobody watching you." He let that sit. "All I need is a name. Morales, I assume. But where exactly? How she's approaching Tucson? What route?" Cole looked at him. "You're offering me my own land. I'm offering you the life you had before yesterday morning." "Holloway," Cole said, "you came onto my land with 6 riders to hunt a 17-year-old girl whose father you had shot. Then you fabricated a murder charge to discredit her. Then you sent men to my barn in the middle of the night. Then you hit me with a rifle stock." He held Holloway's gaze steadily. "The life I had before yesterday morning is already gone. You took it when you rode over that ridge." Something shifted behind Holloway's pale eyes. Not anger. A colder recalculation. "You understand I can't let you leave here," Holloway said. "I figured that around the time your man put a gun to my neck," Cole said. Holloway stood. He buttoned his coat with deliberate, methodical movements. "I'll give you some time to think about whether the girl's cause is worth your life. She's 17 and she's alone and she's never been to Tucson." He walked to the door. "I'll be back in an hour." He went out. Cole sat in the silence and did arithmetic. His wrists were tied behind the chair with rope, good rope tight, but tied by a man in a hurry. The chair itself was old wood. The floor beneath him was packed earth. One window boarded. One door guarded by 2 men. He started working on the rope. 20 miles south, Ayanna was not alone. She'd picked up a tail within 3 miles of the Swiftwind homestead, 2 riders pushing hard to close the gap. She'd pressed the gray mare into a full run across open ground, cutting away from any road navigating by the angle of the rising sun. The mare was good but tired, and the gap was closing, and Ayanna was calculating distances with the cold precision her father had taught her, not panicking, just measuring what was real. Then one of the 2 riders angled away from the pursuit, angled toward her. She pulled a hard left, and the rider matched her, cutting the angle closing fast, and Ayanna had one hand reaching for the rifle in the scabbard when the rider shouted, not a command. Something else. "Runningwater, I'm not with them." She didn't slow down. "My name is Daniel Calloway. Ruth is my aunt. She wired me last night." She looked back. The rider was young, barely 20, riding a hard-breathing sorrel, waving one arm away from his body to show his hand was clear of his holster. The other rider behind them was still coming. "One's still behind us," Ayanna shouted back. "I know. Keep going south. I'll handle him." She looked forward. She looked back. She made the decision in the span of 3 strides. She kept going south. Behind her, she heard the sounds of two horses pulling hard against each other, raised voices, and then a single shot, not at her, off to the east somewhere, and when she looked back again, only Daniel Calloway was riding the other horse, turning back north, riderless. He caught up with her in half a mile. "He's not hurt," Daniel said, reading her face. "Shot his canteen, he's on foot, he'll live." He was breathing hard but controlled. "My aunt sent a wire last night after you left. She didn't trust what she'd done with the first one. She told me what was happening and said to ride toward Mesquite Crossing and watch for you coming south." "You believed her," Ayanna said. "My Aunt Ruth doesn't say things she doesn't mean." He reached into his coat and produced a folded paper. "She also sent this. It's a wire she received this morning from a federal land office clerk in Santa Fe. Someone Thomas Runningwater contacted 3 weeks ago sent a response." Ayanna took it without slowing the mare. She read it while riding, which was not easy, and her hands tightened on the reins when she reached the third line. The Federal Land Office had already flagged the survey documents as inconsistent with existing treaty records. They'd been waiting for the supporting evidence, the letters, the payments, the forged signatures. They had a file open. And no one had told Crane. "Morales," she said. "I need to reach Morales." "I know the way," Daniel said. "Follow me." Back in the assay office, Cole had gotten one hand partially loose and was making quiet progress on the second when the door opened and one of the guards came in. Not Holloway, just one of the riders, a stocky man with a thick beard who looked at Cole with the professional disinterest of someone doing a job. "Boss wants to know if you've reconsidered." "Tell your boss I'm thinking very hard," Cole said. The man looked at the rope around Cole's wrists. He looked at the angle of Cole's shoulders. His eyes narrowed. Cole moved first. He twisted sideways off the chair and came up with the half-loose rope, giving him just enough range of motion to drive his shoulder hard into the stocky man's midsection before either of them had fully registered what was happening. They went into the wall together. The man was heavier and recovered faster than Cole expected, and landed a blow across Cole's back that dropped him to one knee. And then Cole got his thumb into the man's gun hand and bent backward, and something cracked that wasn't Cole. The man made a sound, and his hand opened. Cole had the revolver. He got his back to the wall and looked at the door and waited for 3 seconds. Nobody came through it. "You broke my thumb," the man said from the floor. "I know," Cole said. "Sorry about that." He moved to the door and listened. One set of footsteps outside east side, probably the second guard making a circuit. He counted the steps. Steady, unhurried 12 feet of travel, and back. He waited for the guard to reach the far end of the circuit. Opened the door. Went the other direction. He got 40 yards before someone shouted behind him. He ran. David Morales had a small office above a tailor shop on the south side of Tucson, which was not the kind of office that advertised itself, because the kind of work Morales did was not the kind that benefited from advertising. He was 40 years old, compact and deliberate, with reading glasses perpetually perched on his forehead, and the quality of a man who had heard a great many terrible things, without becoming immune to them. When Ayanna Runningwater walked through his door with an oilskin bundle and a folded affidavit signed by her father and a wire from the Santa Fe Federal Land Office, Morales sat down, put his glasses on, and read everything twice without speaking. Then he looked up. "Your father," he said. "Is he alive?" Ayanna said. "Hidden. He needs the injunction filed before Holloway's people find him." Morales was already reaching for paper. "The survey map with the File C notation. That's direct evidence of Crane's personal authorization, combined with your father's affidavit and the Santa Fe correspondence." He stopped writing and looked at her. "This is a federal case, not territorial. Federal. The difference is that I know which federal judge in this circuit doesn't owe Gerald Crane a single favor." "How long?" she said. "The injunction 2 hours." He was already writing. "The investigation that starts the moment I file, which is before the end of today." Ayanna stood in the middle of his office and felt something loosen in her chest that had been wound tight since before dawn, the morning before something that was not relief exactly. because relief required safety, and nothing was safe yet but something adjacent to it. The sense that the thing her father had built, the years of careful work and careful documentation and careful faith that the truth had weight, was about to contact the ground. She thought about Cole sitting in a chair somewhere with his wrists tied. "I need to go back," she said. Morales looked up from his writing. "Miss Runningwater, Cole Harlan is being held somewhere near Mesquite Crossing. He let himself be captured so I could run. I need someone with authority to go back for him." Morales set down his pen. He looked at her for a careful moment. "If I file this injunction and the federal investigation opens Holloway and his men become criminals in a federal proceeding, any harm they do to Cole Harlan after this filing becomes a federal crime." He picked his pen back up. "Which is one more reason I am going to write faster than I have ever written in my professional life." Daniel Calloway, who had ridden with Ayanna all the way to Tucson and spent the journey being told the complete shape of the situation, was standing at the door with his hat in his hands. "I know where the U.S. Marshal's office is," he said. Ayanna looked at him. "My Aunt Ruth is the one who told him to look into the Craneland filings 6 months ago," Daniel said. "She didn't get far enough for him to act then. She might now." He put his hat on. "You want me to go?" "Go," Ayanna said. "Right now." He went. Holloway found that Cole had escaped at roughly the same time the federal injunction hit the clerk's desk in Tucson, a coincidence that would later seem appropriate to everyone who knew the story. He stood in the empty assay office, looking at the chair and the cut rope and the guard sitting on the floor cradling a broken thumb, and said nothing for a long moment. Then he pulled out his watch. He had people in Tucson. He had people everywhere. The question was whether they were fast enough. He went to the door and started giving orders, and the orders were specific and urgent, and reflected the understanding of a man who knew that the shape of a situation was beginning to change, and that the window for managing it was narrowing fast. Cole was running east on foot across open ground when the U.S. Marshal's riders came up the road from the south, 4 of them moving at a purposeful trot, the kind of pace that covered ground without blowing horses. Cole stepped into the road and put both hands up and hoped very much that the federal paperwork was already in motion. The lead rider pulled up. He was a large man with a sunburned face and a federal badge that caught the afternoon light. "You Harlan," he said. Cole lowered his hands. "How'd you know my name?" "Girl sent word. Said you'd be somewhere between Mesquite Crossing and Tucson looking beat up and stubborn." The marshal looked him over. "She wasn't wrong on either count." "Holloway," Cole said. "We know about Holloway. We know about Crane. Federal injunction was filed 40 minutes ago. Pacific Southern Land Acquisition Operations are frozen pending investigation." The marshal reached down with one hand. "Get up. We've got some men to go find." Cole took the hand and swung up behind the saddle. He thought about Ayanna in Morales' office. He thought about Thomas Runningwater's voice in the low light of the Swiftwind homestead, "Do what I couldn't finish." He thought about a girl running across the desert in a torn dress with blood on both knees, and an entire case for justice pressed against her chest, and he felt something settle in him that had been restless for longer than the last 2 days. "Holloway's got maybe 6 men," Cole said. "All armed. He'll run before he fights." "Let him run," the marshal said. "We know where Crane is. Crane's the one we want." They rode hard toward Mesquite Crossing, and Cole held on and let the miles pass and didn't think about what came next until next arrived. It arrived faster than he expected. They found Holloway not running, which surprised everyone, but standing in the middle of the main street of Mesquite Crossing, with 4 of his riders around him, and Ruth Calloway standing on the steps of her telegraph office, with a shotgun across her arms, and 3 townspeople behind her, none of them armed, but all of them standing there, with the particular stubbornness of people who had decided that this was the line. Holloway looked at the marshal's badge. He looked at Cole behind the marshal's saddle. He looked at Ruth Calloway's shotgun. Cole watched something move across Holloway's face, not fear exactly, more the expression of a man who has just correctly calculated that the game has ended and is updating accordingly. Holloway put his hands up. His 4 riders looked at each other and one by one did the same. Ruth Calloway lowered the shotgun about 2 inches. Not all the way, just enough to show she'd noticed. "About time," she said to the marshal. "Ma'am," the marshal said. Cole slid off the horse and stood in the street. His jaw ached. His back ached where the blow had landed. His wrists were raw from the rope. He looked at Holloway with both hands raised and felt no particular satisfaction and no particular anger. Just the quiet, bone-deep tiredness of a man who had been awake since before yesterday and had spent most of the time in between running or being hit. "Where's Gerald Crane?" Cole said. Holloway looked at him. "Tucson," Holloway said. And then, with the particular tone of a man who has decided that some things are worth preserving, even when the larger thing is lost. "He doesn't know yet. He thinks this is still manageable." "It isn't," Cole said. "No," Holloway agreed. "It isn't." The marshal's men dismounted and took Holloway's riders one by one, and the street of Mesquite Crossing got very quiet, in the way that places get quiet after something large and tense resolves into something settled. Cole walked to the steps of the telegraph office and sat down on them, because his legs had decided they were done regardless of what he thought about it. Ruth Calloway looked down at him. "You look terrible. Been a difficult couple of days." "The girl?" "In Tucson. Safe." He rested his forearms on his knees and looked at the street. "Her father's alive, Ruth. Hidden in the canyon. He needs someone to bring him out." Ruth was quiet for a moment. "I'll send Daniel," she said. Cole nodded. He sat on the steps of a telegraph office in a small Arizona town in the late afternoon and listened to the sounds of the marshal's men doing their work and thought about a rancher who had replaced a fence post 11 days ago and had not since that moment lived a single ordinary hour. He thought about Ayanna's face when she'd understood her father was alive. He thought about Thomas Runningwater's hand extending the envelope in the dim light of a borrowed room. He thought about Holloway's careful smile the first time they'd met on a ridgeline in the afternoon heat, and how certain that smile had been, and how wrong. Somewhere in Tucson, a federal investigation was opening like a door that couldn't be closed again. Cole Harlan sat on those steps and let himself be tired. That was all he needed to do right now. Everything else was already moving without him. The first wire arrived from Tucson at 4:30 in the afternoon, while Cole was still sitting on the steps of Ruth's telegraph office with a cold cup of coffee that someone had brought him and that he hadn't drunk. Ruth came to the door and read it without expression, which Cole had learned meant she was feeling something considerable. "Federal investigators walked into Pacific Southern's Tucson land office 40 minutes ago," she said. "They sealed the files. Crane's head lawyer tried to leave through the back and was stopped at the alley." She paused. "They're calling it the largest territorial land fraud case in Arizona history." Cole looked at his coffee. "Crane," he said, "still at his house. Federal men are on the way there now." Ruth folded the wire. "Morales filed the injunction, and apparently the federal Judge Alderman read the survey map and your name in that margin notation and said words that I will not repeat in polite company." Cole almost smiled. "Good judge." "Good evidence," Ruth said. "Your girl built a good case." "Her father built it," Cole said. "She carried it." Ruth looked at him for a moment with that strong, honest face of hers. "From what I can see, Harlan, she did considerably more than carry it." She went back inside to the telegraph key. The second wire came 20 minutes later. Holloway, sitting in the marshal's temporary custody inside the saloon, received his own news through a rider who came fast from the east. Cole watched from across the street as the marshal read the message and then said something to Holloway that made Holloway close his eyes briefly and sit very still. Cole crossed the street. The marshal looked at him. "You might want to hear this." "Probably," Cole said. "Crane's territorial judge filed his resignation this afternoon, ahead of an inquiry." The marshal folded the note. Turns out, Judge Alderman in the federal circuit had been collecting affidavits from other parties for 6 months, ranchers' Apache families, a Santa Fe land clerk who had flagged the survey inconsistencies, but couldn't get anyone to listen. He looked at Cole steadily. You weren't the only name in that margin notation, Harlan. There were 11 others. 11 properties flagged for acquisition. 6 ranches, 4 Apache land parcels, a water easement belonging to an old widow east of Red Rock who thought she'd just been unlucky with her deed paperwork. Cole looked at Holloway. Holloway had his elbows on the table and was looking at the surface of it. He looked like a man who had spent a professional lifetime believing that the size of the organization behind him made him untouchable and was now recalculating what untouchable actually meant. Holloway, Cole said. Holloway looked up. You had a chance to walk away from this, Cole said, not with anger, just plainly. Somewhere before you came over that ridge with 6 men, there was a moment when this was still a choice. Holloway looked at him for a long time. There's always a moment like that, he said finally. Most people don't see it until it's gone. Cole left him to the marshal and went back outside. Daniel Calloway arrived from the canyon an hour before sunset with Thomas Running Water in a wagon that Clara Swiftwind's husband had lent for the purpose. Thomas was propped against the wagon's sideboard with his shoulder bound and his color better than Cole had feared, but still far from good. He was conscious and alert, and when the wagon stopped in front of the telegraph office, he looked around Mesquite Crossing with the careful cataloging gaze of a man taking inventory of what the world had become in his absence. Cole walked to the wagon. Thomas looked down at him. Neither of them spoke for a moment. Your affidavit reached Morales, Cole said. I know. Daniel had told him on the road. The file C notation. Judge Alderman apparently used language Ruth won't repeat. Thomas looked at him for a moment, and something moved in his dark eyes. Not a smile exactly, but the thing underneath a smile, the relief that comes when a long-held tension finally releases. Ayanna, Thomas said. In Tucson. She's safe. Cole put his hand on the wagon board. She didn't stop. Not once. Not for a moment. Thomas nodded slowly. She never does, he said with a quiet, worn pride that belonged entirely to a father. She was always the one who wouldn't stop. I taught her everything I knew, and she took it and went 3 steps further, and I spent 2 years trying to keep up with her and pretending I was leading. He shifted against the wagon board and winced. The documents. The letters I found, Ayanna cross-referenced them against the land records. She was the one who identified the pattern in the forged signatures. I had the contacts. She had the mind for it. Cole filed that away without comment. He helped Thomas down from the wagon carefully, and Ruth appeared at the telegraph office door and said she had a back room with a proper cot, and Daniel took one side of Thomas, and Cole took the other, and they got him inside. Ruth was already making coffee. Cole stood in the doorway and watched Thomas Running Water lower himself onto the cot with the slow, deliberate care of a man managing real pain, and thought about 4 men coming before sunrise with papers to sign, and about a shot in the gray morning, and about a girl who had already been running when she heard it, because her father had told her months ago what to do if something happened. He'd known. Thomas had known they were coming eventually. He'd built for it. Cole understood something about a man who builds not for himself, but for the moment after he is gone, and felt a respect for Thomas Running Water that had no adequate word in the English language. Ayanna arrived with the last of the daylight. She came in on a borrowed horse with David Morales beside her, and a young federal investigator named Price, who had ridden from Tucson specifically to take possession of Holloway and his men. She swung down before the horse had fully stopped, which was exactly what Cole would have expected, and she was already looking around the street before her boots hit the ground. She saw Cole standing at the telegraph office door. She crossed the distance between them without running, but only just. She stopped in front of him and looked at his jaw where it had swollen and darkened and said, "That looks terrible." "You should see the other man's thumb," Cole said. She looked at him steadily for a moment. "I didn't know if you were going to be alive," she said. Just that. No dramatization. The way she said true things. "I generally try to be," Cole said. Something crossed her face, not the almost laughter this time, but something deeper than that. The genuine unguarded relief of someone who had carried a fear for hours and was only now setting it down. "My father," she said. Inside, resting, giving Ruth opinions on her coffee. She exhaled once completely. Then she straightened and looked past him at the door. "I need to see him." "I know." She went past him. Cole stood in the street and let David Morales shake his hand and listen to the federal investigator Price explain what the next 30 days would look like, the formal charges, the deposition process, the federal land review that would go case by case through every acquisition filing Pacific Southern had made in the territory over the past 4 years. "Crane," Cole said. "Arrested at his home in Tucson at 5:30, Price said. He was young, precise, and had the quality of a man who had studied the law because he genuinely believed in it. He tried to argue that the documents were fabricated. Judge Alderman pointed out that the Santa Fe Land Office had flagged the original treaty inconsistencies 6 months ago independently with no contact from Thomas Runningwater. Price paused. Crane's own lawyers started talking before we'd finished searching the office. When large organizations fail, they fail fast. Cole nodded. Morales was standing slightly to the side listening, and Cole turned to him. "The Canyon Land," Cole said. "The Apache territory west of Red Rock. Federal injunction blocks any further survey or acquisition activity pending a full treaty review," Morales said. "The review will take time, but the land isn't going anywhere." He looked at Cole with the measured expression of a man who chose words carefully. Thomas's case documented a 17-year pattern of treaty erosion. What the federal investigation found in Crane's files today suggests it wasn't an isolated scheme. It was a method, a formula they'd used in 3 other territories. He paused. "This case is going to matter beyond Arizona, beyond this year." Cole looked at the street. He thought about Thomas Runningwater going court to court, band to band, building a case that nobody with power wanted to hear for 3 years until a morning when 4 men came before sunrise. "He should have had help sooner," Cole said. "Yes," Morales said. "He should have." Inside the telegraph office, Cole found Ayanna sitting on the edge of her father's cot, with his hand in both of hers. Thomas was talking not about the case, not about Crane, but about something quiet and personal that stopped when Cole appeared in the doorway. He started to step back. "Come in, Harlan," Thomas said. Cole came in. Thomas looked at him with those steady dark eyes. "My daughter tells me you gave her the grain room with the bolt on the inside. Seemed reasonable? She also tells me you handed her a wrapped biscuit and told her to ride for Tucson. Seemed reasonable too." Thomas was quiet for a moment. He looked at his daughter and then back at Cole. "I've been fighting this case for 3 years, he said. "I want you to understand what I mean when I say that. 3 years of courts and letters and federal offices and people who listened politely and did nothing. 3 years of being told that the shape of the world was what it was." He paused. "You made a decision in 3 seconds to stand between my daughter and 6 armed men. I'd like to understand what that felt like." Cole was quiet for a moment. "It didn't feel like much," he said. "It just felt like the only available option." Thomas looked at him for a long moment. "That," he said, "is either the most honest or the most modest thing I've ever heard a man say." "Probably both," Ayanna said without looking up. Cole felt something shift in his chest, in a way he didn't entirely have language for the particular warmth of being known accurately by people worth being known by. The twist arrived just before full dark, delivered by Investigator Price, with the careful precision of a man who understood that some information changed things. He came into the telegraph office and said he needed a moment with Cole and Ayanna both. And the thing he told them was this. In Crane's files, his investigators had found a separate correspondence file, not File C. A different one that documented Pacific Southern's contingency plans for what to do if the Apache Treaty challenge succeeded in federal court. The plan had included discrediting Thomas Runningwater specifically. Fabricating the murder charge against Ayanna had been prepared months in advance. The false witness, the territorial paperwork, all of it drafted, and waiting to be deployed, if Thomas ever got close enough to a federal judge to be a real problem. They knew, Ayanna said. They knew he was building a real case. For at least a year, Price said. She sat with that for a moment. Cole watched her face as she processed it, the way the information moved through her, the recognition that her father had been walking toward a prepared trap for a year while still walking forward, still building, still believing the truth had weight and would find its level like water through rock. He knew too, she said quietly. He knew they were watching him. He knew it was a real risk. She looked at Cole. And he kept going. Yes, Cole said. Because he believed it would matter, she said. Even if it cost him. It mattered, Cole said. It's mattering right now tonight in a federal building in Tucson. She looked at her father's hand in hers. It mattered, she said, and it was both a statement and a conclusion, and something that sounded like the first solid ground she had stood on in 2 days. Ruth appeared in the doorway with actual food, cornbread and beans and coffee. That was better than whatever Cole had been making alone on his ranch for the past however many years, and the small room filled with the particular warmth of people who have been through something hard together and are now on the other side of it. Harold Fitch, Cole learned, had closed his store and left town before the marshal's men thought to look for him. He got as far as the county line before a rider Price had sent caught up with him. He came back to Mesquite Crossing in the early morning, and what happened to him afterward was a matter for the courts, which was Cole thought exactly where it belonged. Holloway testified. He did it 3 weeks later, in a federal proceeding in Tucson, with the careful, methodical precision of a man who understood that the only remaining decision was how much he could trade and what it was worth. He named Crane in language that left no interpretive space. He named the territorial judge. He named 4 other corporate officials and 2 government clerks who had made the scheme operational. And he sat in that courtroom chair with his flat, pale eyes and his practiced composure and told the truth, or enough of it, because the truth had become the only currency with value. Gerald Crane went to prison. The territorial judge resigned and faced separate proceedings. The forged documents were entered into federal record as evidence of a systematic fraud that had operated for 4 years across 3 territories and had stolen or attempted to steal land from at least 40 families. Thomas Runningwater's name was in the first paragraph of every news account because Morales had been very clear with every journalist who asked about the timeline. The canyon land west of Red Rock was formally placed under federal treaty protection 6 weeks after the injunction. When the order was signed, Thomas was well enough to sit up without assistance and read it in the morning light coming through Ruth's window, and he read it twice, the same way he read everything, and then he folded it precisely and held it in his lap for a long moment. Ayanna watched him. "Father," she said. "I know," he said. "I know." The acquisition filings against Cole's land were voided in the same proceeding along with the 11 other properties. Cole received the official notice on a Tuesday morning and read it standing at his kitchen table, and then set it down and drank his coffee, which was the closest he came to celebration. He did other things that mattered more. He rebuilt the section of eastern fence that had been damaged when Holloway's riders had cut across his property. He repaired his barn and brought his 2 stolen horses back from wherever Holloway's men had taken them. He wrote a letter to the widow east of Red Rock, whose water easement had been in Crane's acquisition files, telling her what had happened and who she could contact to secure her deed permanently, and he sent it without signing his name because it didn't need his name on it. 3 months after the morning Ayanna had burst through the mesquite with blood on both knees and grabbed his arm, she came back to the ranch with her father. Thomas was walking without assistance, favoring the left side slightly, probably permanently. He and Cole shook hands in the yard, and Cole said the coffee was on if they wanted it, which was the way Cole offered most things directly and without elaboration. They sat at the kitchen table, the 3 of them, and Thomas asked about the ranch, and Cole told him, and Ayanna was quiet for a while, in the way she was quiet when she was thinking something she hadn't decided to say yet. Then she said, "My father wants to go back to the canyon, when he's fully recovered. There are families there who need to know what the federal protection order means for their land. He wants to explain it in person." "That sounds like something your father would do," Cole said. "It sounds like something that's going to take a year," Thomas said, and there was a rueful honesty in it that Cole respected. "It'll take what it takes," Cole said. Ayanna looked at him across the table with those old young eyes that had seen too much and understood more than either age or experience fully explained. "You should know," she said, "that when I was riding south with the documents, the part I kept thinking about was not Morales or the federal judge or the injunction." Cole waited. "I kept thinking about a man who told me he lived alone a long time," she said, "and about what my grandmother used to tell me when I was small, that the land remembers the people who protect it. Not just the land they own, all of it. Every acre of ground that a person ever stood on, and said, 'This matters, I will not let this go.'" Cole looked at his coffee cup. "She was a wise woman," he said. "She was," Ayanna said. "So was yours, I'd reckon, to raise a man like you." Cole thought about that. He thought about his mother's small house in Texas and the fence posts he'd driven for his father at 12 years old, and the particular way the land of his childhood had smelled in the morning, and how far he'd traveled from it, and how the traveling had shaped him in ways he didn't always understand. Until a moment like this one, when a girl said something plain and true, and it landed in the center of him, like it had always been waiting there. "She did all right," he said. Thomas Runningwater looked at his daughter and then at Cole and said nothing, but the look itself was complete and carried everything that needed to be carried without a word. They finished the coffee. Thomas and Ayanna rode out in the late afternoon back toward Mesquite Crossing, back toward whatever the next chapter of a case that had changed everything looked like. Cole stood in his yard and watched them go, and felt the particular quality of silence that is not emptiness, but fullness. The silence of a place that has been through something and is now stubbornly still standing. He had a ranch. He had his horses back. He had his well and his land and his fence posts and his quiet. He also had something he hadn't started 2 days ago, with the knowledge that he had stood in the gap when it mattered, that he had thrown a wrapped biscuit at a horse and bought 3 seconds for the truth to run, and that those 3 seconds had been enough. Not every man got to know that about himself. Cole Harlan walked back into his house, set the coffee on, and looked out his eastern window at the fence line, where his neighbor's grandmother had once walked in the early mornings, quiet and unhurried, picking juniper berries from the brush. He thought about waving. He thought about all the silences a person carries without knowing their weight until the moment they finally set them down. And he understood, standing there in the kitchen of a small ranch in Arizona Territory, that some debts to the land and to the people who walk across it cannot be paid in a single moment, only in the daily deliberate choice to see who is running, and to step forward, and to say, "Not on my land. Not today. Not while I'm standing here." That was the kind of man Cole Harlan had always been. He just hadn't known it until a girl in a torn red dress showed him what it looked like from the outside, and that knowledge, earned hard and paid for in full, was the one thing Gerald Crane, with all his forged documents, and all his pale-eyed fixers, and all his money, and his patience, and his careful practiced certainty, had never once been able to take from him.